This is work that has, it's building on, I would say, a decade of work by IDEA members around the really thorny area of impact measurement and monitoring and evaluation for development education, for global citizenship education. So we're really happy to have so many people joining us, and you're really welcome. Um, I'm just going to present the agenda for this morning before I hand over to my colleagues then. So basically, we're having some welcoming words right now, and we'll have some housekeeping shortly. And then we're going to be joined by Rory McKiernan, our CEO, just for some, again, introductory words to welcome everybody who's joining us. I will then present the theory of impact itself in brief, because we are aware that some of you joining are, very familiar with the theory of impact for global citizenship education, but some of you will be new to it. And it's important to understand, I think, the theory itself and the model we've created in order then to understand the tool. Then my colleagues Lizzie and Rudy will present, I suppose, the tool itself. And we're really pleased then to be joined by our colleague Anna Larcher from Jean's Secretariat. And Anna will share a few words about the importance of measuring impact of GCE from Jean's perspective. We'll have some questions and answers at the end. Please feel free to pop your questions into the chat as we go, and then we'll have some closing words. We hope to finish up this part of the launch by 12 midday, and we'll just take a short break then before some of us will reconvene for a training on how to use the tool. But we'll explain more about that once we finish this session. Lizzie, I'll hand over to you now.
Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Lizzie Noon. I am the Capacity Development Manager of IDEA, and I've been working very closely with the Theory of Impact tool over the last while. But just to go through maybe some housekeeping this morning, obviously we follow the DOCA's guide for ethical communication. So there will, as you know, this session is being recorded, but we'll also be taking screenshots for our social media this morning as well. So just to let you know that, if you really don't want to appear, please let us know. Right now, if you could put your name, your affiliation, and your pronoun in the renaming option on Zoom. And if we could ask everybody to remain on mute during the presentations, and please use the chat throughout for questions and answers, because it's going to be a quick hour before we go into the training. I'd like to welcome our CEO, Rory McKiernan, now to maybe say a few words, and particularly a few words of thank yous. This whole process has not been about IDEA creating this. This has been created by the members. So I'm sure Rory will have lots of thanks. So thank you, Rory.
Thanks, Lizzie. Welcome, everybody. Céad Míle Fáilte, you're all very welcome. I'd love to know where everyone is joining from. I do have a little bit of a sense. I know we have people from throughout Europe and throughout Ireland, north and south, east and west. So yeah, thank you for making the time this morning to be part of this. And indeed, many or most of you have already been part of this process and have been more than that, been instrumental to the process. However, there are some new people here that are maybe also new to IDEA. So a little bit of background. We're over 20 years old now, I think 22 years old. And we're a key strategic partner of Irish Aid, focused on strengthening capacity of the development, education, and global citizenship education sector. And we might also add in education for sustainable development. So essentially, we're a national network, all island on both sides of the island, both jurisdictions, a leading voice in the sector with over 100 members. That would be organizational members and also individual, many of whom are here today. So very much we're an ecosystem covering formal, non-formal, informal, across the lifespan of learning from young to old in all classes, all walks of life. And I suppose that's a key aim, is to ensure that GCE reaches people across the spectrum. And obviously, as you've already heard, members do use a range of terminologies. Some people also use global education. So we won't focus too much on terminology today, but you also may be aware of the Code of Good Practice that IDEA uses. There's lots more information on that on ideaonline.ie. And that's very much ensuring that our members are very much focused on good practice that is rooted in looking at root causes and critical thinking pedagogy around GC. And obviously all of this is aligned to SDG target 4.7. So I suppose part of the backstory here is we know that this work works well. All of you know that for the most part that this work works well. We hear stories, evidence, anecdotal evidence every day of the week. We have reports, we have evaluations, but often we come at it from different ways, different approaches, different terminologies. And I suppose we do have sometimes we have opponents, sometimes we have people that might be critical or even cynical or even cautious. And increasingly, in a kind of cost conscious environment, people want to know, well, is this worth investing in? Can you show me the proof? Show me the evidence? And we will say, of course we can. But across the sector, we've been had this challenge to find a common alignment to measure, to demonstrate, and to communicate, but not to be so rigid that we take all the good out of something magic and make it so defined and so rigid that it loses its essence or indeed its soul. So the challenge, no small feat indeed, that everybody's been involved in here for a few years now, is to come up with a theory and then a model and a framework that we can deploy. And I suppose really about to test and to pilot. So we're not pretending here that we found the panacea to everything. This is very much a pilot. But we are very confident in the next iteration, and with your support, we will be testing it in a really robust manner. So I won't speak for too much longer, but I do want to say like a massive, sincere thanks to the key staff team, particularly Elaine and Anya, who has left IDEA now to move on to Brussels, and now Lizzie, her successor, and everyone in the team that has fed into this and championed it, but also then the wider membership that have been instrumental in the task forces and groups that have met. It's not always glamorous kind of work, sometimes a little bit thankless. And it's really the kind of behind the scenes crunchy stuff that needs to be thought through. And that's what brings us to a moment like today, is all that kind of intellectual sweat and debate and deliberation. So it genuinely is hugely appreciated. And that includes Susan Galway, the consultants that have worked on it, Rudy O'Reilly, and everybody else that has been part of it along the way. And a huge thanks to our funders, Irish Aid as well, and indeed Troker and Concern, for supporting us in all of this work and also encouraging us, and I suppose giving us a kind of a supportive environment to explore it as well. And I suppose this is a kind of a win-win for everybody, where funders, member organizations, others hopefully across Europe, across the world, will be able to benefit from this, so that we'll be able to show the massive evidence and the massive bank of stories, statistics, evidence out there of why this works and why it is so necessary and so urgent in this moment of climate collapse, of division, of polarization, of rampant racism, of a real existential emergency, when development education, education for sustainable development, GCE, has never ever been so important. So this work really brings us to the next level, and hopefully will act as a key point in helping attract new funding, new resources, to give it the proper due credit, support and investment that it really needs to reach people across the spectrum. So thanks very much everybody for being here today, and to our speakers and to all of you who have helped make this happen. So I'll hand back over to Elaine, and thank you again.
Thanks, Rory. So my role really, I suppose, is just to sort of present the theory of impact for GCE model to you all. As I said, it's fundamental that we understand the model in order to then understand how the tool will work. And this, as I said, this work has been going on for a very long time. I'm not going to kind of set out the steps that brought us to this point today, but they're really well documented on the IDEA website in terms of how the theory of impact itself was developed, and also all of the work that happened before that in terms of desk reviews. We did case studies, we have done results framework training and toolkits. So it's all there on the IDEA website, and I'd be very happy to talk anybody through it or to share any learning from that if anybody wants to follow up with us after today. But I just want to present kind of 3 key learnings that we've garnered in IDEA from the work with our members around measuring impact. So the first one is really related to a simple results chain. And this is usually how we describe what we put into the GCE process, I suppose, and what comes out of it within a project timeframe. So, simply put, your organization does something, the target group gains new knowledge, hopefully changes their behavior or practices, and there's a change in their situation. But we came to realize that impact comes after this. We can stand over the results of our work, but measuring impact is longer than this simple results chain. It's off the screen from what we see here. And we realize as well, like it's really important not to just focus on what we do, what we input, like the activities that we run or the resources that we developed, but to try to understand who is doing what differently as a result of our GCE work. So that was one of the first kind of, I suppose, might sound simple, but really understanding when impact happens. The second thing is really linked to the vision of the theory of impact for GCE, and it's about understanding how social change happens. And again, this might seem very obvious, but we just started to, really the statement that social change requires more than just a simple one-off intervention. So many GCE and development education activities can be seen as a one-off intervention or workshop, and social change requires much more than that. The good news is that systemic social change requires multiple interventions, and that can only be done by a network of organizations. So we want to see people throughout their lives and across all settings that they come into, whether it's education, volunteering, working, traveling, that they're receiving the same GCE messages or messages at least embedded with the same GCE values on a repeated basis. If we think of any sort of, a campaign to influence how people think about something, you're going to need to make sure they hear that message many, many times. And again, this can only really be done by a network of organizations. And that made us, I suppose, really happy to think about, okay, how can we harness the collective impact of what all of the IDEA members are doing? The third thing then is trying to understand what we can actually influence. So kind of combining the simple results chain, which we have some control over, and then the fact that people need to hear these messages multiple times in multiple settings in order to really change their behavior and their thinking around global justice issues. And we found this diagram very useful. So it moves through a circle of control, what we directly control in our GCE work, to a circle of influence, and then finally a circle of concern. And we came to learn, I suppose, that the really big social change that we want to work towards is happening in that circle of concern, and that we need to try to find a way to show the kind of contribution of GCE work to that much wider picture of social justice, environmental justice, and so on. So understanding, I suppose, what we can control and what we can't also was really formative for the theory of impact model. So after kind of all this learning through different settings, the IDEA staff, training workshops, our quality and impact group, various groupings of members coming together, we agreed that we need to approach impact measurement as a network in order to identify collective impact. So going beyond a project timeframe, going beyond a single donor's project, going beyond a one-off intervention. And again, that's just really important in terms of then presenting our theory of impact model. So the theory of impact for GCE, which was launched by IDEA at the end of 2025, it's presented in this pyramid model. And I'll just talk you through it in brief. The pyramid model kind of reflects this circle of control, influence, and concern. So the basis is our guiding principles, and that's really around quality, GCE, and what the activities themselves should look like. And then the first level after that are intermediate outcomes that we're working towards as a sector. And those intermediate outcomes are categorized with three different groupings. So one category focuses on educators, and that's educators from, early years, youth workers, community development workers, university lecturers, anybody who has a role in delivering, let's say, GCE activity to a group of learners. The second category then in the blue in middle is the category of learners. So they're the people that we work with. And sometimes the educators and the learners mix or cross. They can be, in IDEA, our learners might actually be educators. So, there's a little bit of overlap between those two categories. And then the third category in green on the right-hand side are the kind of organizations, the partnerships, the kind of settings that we work within, the kind of structures that we have around GCE. So there's several intermediate outcomes that aren't detailed here, but I'll come to those on that kind of first level. And then they contribute to one long-term outcome for each category of educators, learners, and organizations. And then finally, this is all feeding into the collective vision that we have, and which I will read out. So there's two sides to this vision. One is that people in Ireland drive action for a just, sustainable, and interconnected world, navigating it with civic courage and critical thinking. So that's really focusing on individuals and communities. And then the second side of the vision is that policies, practices, and systems in Ireland reflect GCE principles, building a fairer and more sustainable society. So that's kind of focusing on, the more complex structures and systems that we work within. So that's the pyramid itself. You'll see that this first level of intermediate outcomes is not detailed on the pyramid because it would just become too big, but I have them on the following slides. And you'll see, for instance, that the first long-term outcome around educators, then it's here on this next slide, and the long-term outcome is up in the left-hand corner, and then that's complemented by 5 intermediate outcomes for the educators. And that structure then is reflected for learners, which has 1 long-term outcome and 3 sets of intermediate outcomes. And then finally, the organizations, again, the 1 long-term outcome from the pyramid model, and then 6 intermediate outcomes. I'm not going to read through them all in detail. They're all available. We'll share the slides afterwards. But it's really important that now we understand, I suppose, that the levels and the intermediate outcomes are really crucial, because that's how we're going to gather data from the IDEA members to feed into our tool. And I'm going to hand over to Lizzie, who's going to talk us through the tool.
Thank you, Elaine. Thanks so much. So having worked in the sector for quite a while now, I'm really excited, as I said, that we've, kind of finally come together and seen different work from different sectors all come together. And I guess this is one thing, and you probably got that sense from Elaine as well, of kind of standardizing our interim outcomes, but not as we dig deeper into the tool as well, we'd be looking at kind of standardizing indicators. And that's really so that we can show a proper collective impact from the whole entire sector. This is just a little snapshot because I leave the wowing to Rudy, our colleague for the last couple of months, who has patiently listened to our concerns and helped us build this fantastic tool as well. So that's just a snapshot. It's based on the Sankey diagram, and all will be explained. And those who are attending the training will also see. So you can see there, just from the snapshot, we're looking at those long-term outcomes of educators, learners, and organizations as well. So we can really build that full picture as well. So as we explained, the vision level is that high-level change. Now, because this is the quality of this tool depends on the quality of data that's being put in. And as time goes on, that's where we will really have more information for that vision level as well. So, and at the vision level, we will gather the evidence that suggests how we expect GC to help create that systematic social change, as explained with the visionary as regards the people and also the policy change. In time, we will draw on a variety of relevant evidence as it becomes available. So that will include data from educational institutions and funders and future research to support the theory of impact progress towards this vision with evidence. But at the moment, it is about our members and the GCE community coming together to show that collective impact. Some organizations will work with just educators, some organizations will just work with learners, but really I think all organizations work on 3 levels of organization, educators, and with learners as well. It helps IDEA members to place the outcomes of their work into a much broader picture of impact, and we will collate and analyse the data gathered for the interim outcome level, which we'll go through now. It's hoped, and already even with our brilliant advisory group, can I just say an extra thank you to the advisory group that has been working with us tirelessly since January to develop this tool. So already we have some data in our tool from their good quality testing, I guess, and with the pilot we're hoping that 30 will come in. So then we'll have the impact of 30 organisations. We'll present it in a way that best illustrates the progress towards long-term impact via our online data visualization tool. I guess when we think about it, we are putting our greatest hits from GCE into this tool. So really showing what we are doing, and so it's the greatest hits, I guess, of GCE that are going into this tool, which will really, really help to show the impact of the 14 outcomes that we have identified. So you probably had a quick look there. So, for example, the learners are based on heart, head, and hands. So that's easy enough for people to think, how am I influencing people's hearts, heads, and hands through this? So it's really identifying who's doing what differently as a result of our GCE interventions. And we will talk a little bit, maybe, I know that one question that you may have is between the code and the theory of impact is the code shows us how we do it, and then the theory of impact is really showing that impact and what it's doing. So I guess I suppose, looking at the kind of form of quantitative and qualitative results that you have already. We all have so much data already through our results frameworks, through our annual reports, and through our submissions of the Code of Good Practice. So really what this impact tool is doing, which is, I would say, very easy to use, is gathering that information so we can put it into a way in which it's showing the impact and not only how we do that as well. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Rudy, who I'm going to thank again profusely for particularly the patience in which he's worked with everybody and taken on board all of our comments, taken on board all of how we work as this sector. Because when you think about it, we're working in a sector from, the youth, from adults and community, from post-primary to primary. So there's lots of different sectors to all bring together, and albeit as well the informal education sector. So thank you, Rudy, and thank you again for your patience.
Thank you very much. Thanks a mil, Lizzie, for that. So look, lovely to meet you all. My name's Rudy. I run a data visualization studio called Data and Design, and the last few months I've been trying to understand the difference between impact indicators, intermediate outcomes, and going on what's been a really wonderful journey with that kind of steering group that we've had. So like Elaine and Lizzie have both said, there's going to be a training for some of you in the second half of this call. So this is not going to be a comprehensive look through the kind of tool that we've built for this pilot study, but rather what I want to give you is kind of like almost opening Pandora's box in terms of like my design process and why we've kind of designed things the way we have. But I suppose just to say that it's being done so in a very kind of iterative, collaborative way with a lot of not just but ideas members as well. And I can see some of those friendly faces on this call who are involved with shaping this. So I suppose like when you will get access to this website, you kind of have three main aspects to it. We're going to be looking at exploring GCE impact. That's in the impact section. We're going to be reporting on your own impact and organization. That's in the survey section. And then there's a variety of materials like that, some of which have been presented already, that we'll capture in the supporting info section. So I'll briefly touch on these two, but really I'm going to spend most of my time that I have allocated here showing you some of the visuals we have around impact. But first, around supporting info. So this website will be it's going to be a one-stop shop for all things theory of impact. So we can access the model that Elaine showed us earlier. We can go in as well to some of the intermediate outcomes. So this is an interactive way that we can explore some of those. So these were the 15 or so different intermediate outcomes that Elaine introduced earlier. And the last thing in that section are what IDEA are calling impact indicators. So within each of these outcomes, we can look at like what are some things that we can actually measure across different organizations. Because I suppose one challenge here is that like if we want to show collective impact and we're showing what everyone's doing in a slightly different way, how can we then show collective? So that's being the real I suppose the real challenge working on this project is how we combine the qualitative and quantitative. How do we allow people to, capture some hard numbers around what they're doing, but then not just make it completely about the numbers? Because then if we do that, we lose the actual, the stories and people actually changing their habits and outcomes from that. And like Rory said at the start of the call, I don't know if we've solved this definitively, but we've created something iteratively with the help of our members that we think it's going to be a really nice way to kind of, I suppose, show that collective impact. So yeah, so these are we've got within the tool, we've got the kind of supporting info. We have the survey, which I'm really not going to touch much at the moment. I'll just show you briefly that, like, one, you can click on it and come through and start, filling out this information here. Like we said, this pilot will be for IDEA members only. And after this half of the call, Elaine and Lizzie will be taking some of you through training about how we use this. But essentially, it's not like, all the data is being captured on the platform. It doesn't like send you to a survey monkey or anything like that. And we quickly kind of moved away from things like that because we saw the depth and complexity of the questions we needed to ask, and also the interdependence between some questions. If you ask this, we should send you down this way. If you answer this way, we should send you another way, and so on. So I'm not going to touch on the survey too much. I'm just checking the chat. Oh yeah, so yeah, Lizzie just said that the survey will be explored in training. So I'm not going to take us any further through the survey, but rather just tell you that this is where we fill in information in the survey. And information can be filled in at an organization level about your organization, which is really useful for IDEA to understand more of its member base, and then around the outcomes. And that's really where we're reporting on the global citizen education impact. Okay. I'm also talking very quickly because I've quite a short slot to get through all this. All right, so let's get on to my favorite part. The reason it's my favorite part is that I run a data visualization studio, and visualizing this data around these different levels of the model has been a huge task because we've got huge amounts of information going from long-term vision. I misspeak every time I talk about this model as well. So even this 5 months in, still haven't got it down. But we've got the long-term vision to the long-term outcomes to the intermediate outcomes. And then within each intermediate outcome, we might have an activity, a workshop, a different organization. And it just becomes this huge, like I started trying to create these, like, maybe spider diagrams, but it just became this massive mess. And I was like, how can when we show that to funders or we show that to the public, how do we do it in such a way that it's not just, we're not just showing people a huge, massive spider web or like those kind of, people who are cracking a serial killer case with the post-its and lines between them. So how can we do that? So I'll get to the fun part. So what we've done is we've kind of created a visualization based on something called a Sankey diagram. This diagram was invented by a man from Tipperary in Ireland, actually, back in the 1800s. And he was a mechanical engineer like I used to be in a past life. But really, Sankey diagrams are just a way of showing flows. They're normally done left to right. We're doing ours vertical, and I'm going to explain why. But what we're looking at is we can look at flows of a particular quantity going down between long-term vision, category, intermediate outcome, all the way down. Now, when I say a quantity, what do I mean? Well, the quantity can be different things. We can look at this collective impact in terms of total hours. So this is the total hours that have been inputted into our tool so far of participant activity, right? So we're not saying that the total GCE work done in Ireland or wherever this year has been 300 hours. Absolutely not. And that's why we want to run this pilot study first, so we can capture some of these results and then go out to funders and to the public with these results. But we can look at this in terms of total hours. So we can see we start at the total, then it breaks down into educators, then it breaks down into the intermediate outcomes for educators. Or I could switch this if I wanted to something like participants. And now we can see the difference here where we're seeing the different participants across each of these intermediate outcomes and areas. So we're able to actually control what what people are actually seeing as we explore this diagram. So the width of each of these bars is determined by what is it we're looking at. Is it hours, participants, and what we even have is within each of our indicators as well. I don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole because I'm barely able to survive the rabbit hole myself. So I'll switch back to total hours. So what we're looking at is there we start off at a high level, so total long-term vision. We can then click into things like category. So that's our educator or learner or organization. Within each of these, we have our intermediate outcomes. We can see in these two, like for the steering group, it's a small, tight-knit group. So we haven't got submissions across all of these intermediate outcomes yet, right? We only have them across a couple of them, for example. And then within that, if I click on an intermediate outcome, I can come down to a particular organization, right? And I can kind of drill all the way down to see what has each organization run. I can do that again here, right? So I can click on a different intermediate outcome and then see the organization there. And the idea here is that like what we wanted to do was create something that will let us kind of see the collective, which is at the moment is showing the hours, showing showing hours or showing total participants, but also let us drill down to actually like look at the individual, right? So taking this particular challenge. Okay, so now what we can do is we can take one particular activity that somebody did, click into it, and kind of get a sense for what it is that was done, right? So this is a submission that somebody put into the tool. We can see on the map where it happened in Ireland, and we can see the hours that were done, when it was done, and so on. Another thing I should have mentioned is that we can also see this on a what I call a breadcrumb, but it's basically seeing where did you get to, what did I click on to get down to where this is. And the idea is that we can always flip back and forward, right? And the whole concept of how can we go from individual to collective impact is that I can do that jumping back and forward at any level, right? So not just down at the bottom where we're looking at one particular activity. I can click on educators and look and say, okay, for educators overall, what's going on across Ireland and GCE, right? And at the moment, we can see like a lot of the activities are more Dublin focused, but again, we haven't had a massive amount of submissions. So what we hope is at the end of this, you kind of build up this wider base, this wider base of knowledge around Ireland. And we can start seeing things like participant quotes, right? So now we're kind of getting a sense for like, here's what people are saying about the work that IDEA's members are doing across educators across Ireland, right? So I suppose to recap, and it is hard to do it in a short space of time, and we've put in little explainers and hand-holding things within the tool, but essentially we can kind of go from high level impact all the way down as granular as we want. And at any point we can switch over to a view which shows us like, okay, what am I looking at right now? For example, there might be, I might be looking here at critical reflection and positionality. Let's look at critical reflection and positionality, which is one of the intermediate outcomes. And here's what some of the quotes that are coming in from that intermediate outcome. So a little bit of handholding needed, but I think this way we've got a huge amount of power to be able to go from high level all the way down to low level. The last thing I want to show you is that we can also filter it. So you're all working across different, education sectors, you're all across different organizations. We can change that here, right? So for example, you might be interested in looking at the impact of post-primary education. We've got that there, primary education and so on. So we've got a huge kind of power at our fingertips in terms of how we can kind of manipulate, play around with and look at this data. I'm sure you'll have plenty of questions. Hopefully those questions would be addressed by the training today. But the hope is that at the end of this pilot project, with many of you getting involved and inputting this data yourselves, this is going to build a much larger, much more nuanced, much more powerful picture of the impact around the work that folks are doing. That folks are doing in Ireland. So I'm going to stop sharing now. I'm going to come into the chat because I haven't been looking at chat messages, and I'll stay here replying to any of those. So thank you.
We are delighted to also have with us today Anna Larcher from Jean, who's going to say a couple of words, I guess, on like what the importance is as well for the entire European sector and the importance of the theory of impact. So Anna, just to give you a little bit of a background. So as you know, and for those who don't know, it's the Global Education Network of Europe, and she's in the Secretariat, where she leads the research to policy work, supporting policymakers with research and bridging research and policy towards better research-informed policy making in global education. She holds a PhD from Imperial College London and is a researcher at the Centre for International Studies. Her research focuses on the evaluation of international development, critical development perspectives, and global education. She has also taught in the African Studies and International Development Studies programme at the ISCTE in Lisbon University Institute, where she has sought to support critical and decolonial thinking. Anna has extensive experience as an international consultant, working across Africa, Europe, and Middle East for UN agencies and the European community and other international organisations, supporting the planning and evaluation of development projects. She's also worked with CSOs across research, evaluation, and project work. Her work on global education is strongly informed by all of these experiences. God, we nearly, maxed out our time with your brilliant CV, Anna. We're delighted to have us and very much aligned with the work that we're doing today. So welcome. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much for this extensive introduction. And thank you really very much for the invitation to be here today. And I would like to start by passing on apologies from Liam Wegiment, which is the director of GEAN. He's traveling this morning, so he couldn't be here today. But both Liam and I wanted to congratulate IDEA and IDEA members on the launch of this theory of impact tool. And we truly believe that this is an achievement worth celebrating, and I'm really truly impressed with what we have seen so far. And we really think that this brings us closer to what we have been trying to do in GEAN and with GEAN members for a long time, which is to really better understand the collective effects of global education and to demonstrate its transformative power. And I just want to share with you some reflections done from the work we do in GEAN on evaluation of global education. So, as you said, GEAN it brings together ministries and agencies that we in the field of education and foreign affairs, and we have over 25 countries represented, and we work with the policymakers to facilitate policy learning, peer sharing, and to support their work in global education across multiple dimensions. So from this work, we know that evaluation is really a central concern in global education. And this is clear in the number of evaluation processes that are conducted in various European countries and which GEAN has been documenting over the years. And you will find it in publications such as the State of Global Education, which you can access in the GEAN website. And importantly, in the European Declaration on Global Education to 2050, the Dublin Declaration, which represents a shared consensus among European countries on key priorities for global education, one of the commitments is precisely to support the development of monitoring and evaluation approaches that are relevant and that are more appropriate to global education. And this was a priority in the development of the Dublin Declaration because there is a broad recognition that the existing evaluation models fail to capture all these complexities of the transformations that global education is seeking to promote. And several GEAN countries have been actively exploring and are trying to build alternative models of evaluations for their own programs in global education. And GEAN has been facilitating this reflection on the evaluation of global education, and we're trying to broaden the debate to include other ideas, other models, other methods that may be more appropriate and useful to understand global education. And this builds also on a reflection that Jean has been engaged on in evaluation almost since its inception in 2003. There was a conference in London on quality and evaluation, and we've continued this work. And recently, actually, we developed a paper which I just learned this morning is going to be published on the 1st of July together with a publication. And for this, Jean brought together academics, civil society actors, including IDEA, and policymakers to explore where evaluation in global education stands today and where it needs to go. And across a variety of perspectives, we identified a set of shared principles. And these principles call for evaluation models that embrace complexity and predictability, that account for the creative potential of global education, and that focus on understanding processes of change from the perspective of the actors, that value subjectivity and the qualitative dimensions of evaluation, embracing multiple methods, and also that see evaluation as a research process, as based on experimentation and critical reflection. So this brings me to the work conducted by IDEA, the theory of impact, and this tool presented today. And as you can see, it is very much aligned with several of these shared principles. So for us, it's important because it offers a model to capture all this complexity and collective transformations without reducing the depth and the complexity. So we really believe it's an important contribution for this debate, for this exploration about better evaluation methods. And for Jean, it really offers an important model to share with other countries and organizations that are trying to rethink evaluation. But, just to close, I would just like to remind ourselves that this work is not just about evaluation. It's also about harnessing the collective and transformative power of global education as a force for change, as Elaine said earlier. And as people working in global education, we all share at the moment concern that the values at the heart of our work are increasingly under threat. And Rory highlighted this in the beginning. And I was listening recently to an interview with Judith Butler, and she was saying that the right is doing now a better job at appealing to the passions of people and in particular to their fear and hatred. So this is the moment for us to be engaged in collective imagining of a better world. And she added that for that we need an openness to learning about how global networks of power are working, and we need to be producing our own networks of power that have ideals and imagination at the core. And this, as we all know, is exactly what global education does. So I think ultimately this is why this work, your work, matters here. And so I would really like to congratulate all of those involved, IDEA and IDEA members, for this really important work, and encourage you to continue to inspire us, to share it with us, and to take this work forward. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna. Really grateful for your inputs and anything that Jean can help us with to, refine the tool as we use it. We're really grateful for your expertise in that as well, and also amplifying it and sharing with partners around Europe. So thank you so much.